Welcome to Media Rants. On March 5th, the City of Oshkosh Communication and Engagement Division announced via email their plans to end Life TV and cable access Channel 2, apparently to create office space in the Oshkosh Media Studios in City Hall. Thanks to citizen activism, the date for discontinuing Life TV/Channel 2 was put off. And here we are in late July, and it looks like consensus is building to move Life TV productions over to the Oshkosh Public Library. And the issue now in late July is whether Channel 2 will continue to exist so that those productions recorded in the library will be shown to a cable TV audience. Even before the City of Oshkosh Common Council has officially decided on these matters, the Communication and Engagement Division already removed the Oshkosh Media sign on City Hall. That was a sign that for many years demonstrated to citizens that the City of Oshkosh did have a commitment to listening to diverse voices. Well, all that's up in the air right now. And today on Media Rants, I'm going to be interviewing Andy Thoman. Andy sits on the City of Oshkosh Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. He's been a very strong voice on this particular issue of Oshkosh media. He's got a background in radio, TV, film from UW Oshkosh. He works in marketing. He's got some pretty strong opinions on what this whole episode regarding Life TV says about things like transparency and about civic engagement in the city of Oshkosh. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what Andy has to say about these issues. Andy and I recently did sit for an interview with Cheryl Hentz and Sarah McInich on their show, Eye on Oshkosh, and I'll put a link to that episode in the description of this show. So stick around and listen to this interview with Andy Thoman. I guarantee you'll find it fascinating. Andy, thanks so much for doing this. And let's just move right into some of these really important issues that impact the future of cable access television in the city of Oshkosh. So, one feeling that I've gotten in watching this over the last few months is that most of our city councilors and probably also the Communication and Engagement Division don't really know what's meant by PEG access, PEG access. Can you explain what is PEG access?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten that same experience that I talk to people. Like the more conversation I've had, I agree. There's a lot of people who don't seem to really understand what they're talking about. Like even I've talked to some people say like, well, we're required to do the G part, the government part. And I guess I should back up for anyone who doesn't know what PEG access. So public, educational, and government, and that's what we mean by PEG, PEG. And so it means that different communities should have access to cable, the infrastructure, because the infrastructure is going through our land essentially, and part of that trade-off is saying, well, we want to make sure that not only giant corporations dominate that space, which is a primary communication space. So we want to make sure that we reserve some of that space for the public, which is a lot of what we're talking about, Life TV, Channel 2, and for educational purposes. So often schools will have channels like we have. I actually don't know if Titan TV, I assume that. I actually don't know. And that is at the university, UWO, or other school systems might have. And then G, the government side, which would be our Channel 10 GovTV. And I think where there's a lot of confusion is some people think, well, we only have to, some people, some counselors or some other community members I've talked to think like we only need to do the government part, which first, there technically isn't a requirement to do any of it. There's no legal requirement, but it's more so there is in the spirit of civic engagement and open communication and free speech, that we give access to those channels, but because again, we don't want those to be dominated by for-profit places. And if you leave that up to algorithms or whatnot, it will be dominated by profits. When PEG originally started, it was because at that time we didn't have social media and whatnot. Like the only way to get your message out was through cable or over the air. Um,
Mhm.
and over the air is a different challenge that we talk about some other time. Like that's a lot of infrastructure to be able to send your stuff over. But cable, being over cable, if only giant companies can say, I'm going to lease out this channel spectrum, um, it really eliminates the public or small governments or educational institutions to be able to be in that same communication space. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I could go on and on, but I'm sure we'll cover it as we go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, PEG access has been a core part of getting some citizen engagement with government. And when you and I appeared on Eye on Oshkosh with Cheryl and Sarah not too long ago, you made the point that the city seems to be moving toward a kind of marketing model
Mhm.
of media in which the communication is essentially one way coming from City Hall. And you said it, you used the metaphor from George Orwell, a ministry of truth. I was intrigued by that. Can you expand on what you mean by the city gravitating toward a ministry of truth model?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in a nutshell, like you said, it means that the communication is unbalanced, that it's only one way. And so the reason I used Ministry of Truth from 1984 is because in that, like, what it is they restrict the communication from one way, and just like if communication is only coming out from the government and there can be no other process coming back, that tremendously hurts democratic processes and civic engagement, whether intentional or not, whether nefarious or not. I think some of this is unintentional and they don't recognize the ramifications that has. So I'm not trying to imply that we're in a 1984 situation, but I am. I think the analogy stands that when you remove access to go one way and not the other way, that it does create an imbalance of communication. And that's what I meant by that, is that imbalance of communication, where now all of a sudden we have a department that used to be involved in engagement and communication out is now only saying we're only going to communicate out, we're only going to market out, which I'm not against marketing. Like I work in marketing, and that is good. The city should be good at marketing. That is one of the problems I think we're trying to solve in Oshkosh, and I'm glad we're heading in that direction. But to do it at the expense of eliminating the public's voice is what really concerns me. And what also really concerns me about that, like it doesn't need to be done at the expense of that. They can and should be done in parallel, where you have a balance to make sure that it's not only the government saying, here's the message that matters. Again, whether it's intentional or not, that's not the point. What is the point is that it is an imbalance, and that will slowly erode people's ability to be informed, to participate. Even the informed aspect of it, people say, well, I can get all my messaging still from GovTV, which is great. I'm glad you can. But there is going to be a certain component missing, nefarious or not. Like I'm not even saying it's intentional, but there will be an aspect missing from civic engagement and civic participation. Now that's just from the political side. I think another area that a lot of people are missing is one of the things you lose when you lose that balance is a lot of the beauty that public access brings with it. Documenting and archiving, your arts and your culture, a lot of that should be captured in public access. And whether it's happening or not at the time isn't necessarily, like some people have made the argument, it's being underutilized. And to me, that doesn't mean it's obsolete. It means that it's been under promoted, under invested. So instead, you need to
Right.
say, how can you make sure that this balance exists? And if we feel like there's some sort of imbalance, don't just eliminate one. You invest in it to make sure that we have that proper balance, that we have neutrality of voices, that we live in a pluralistic society, which is a good thing in my opinion, and we need to make sure we uphold that. And when you silence one of those sides, it's really hard to uphold that, and it's really hard to encourage that.
Well, I'm not a First Amendment attorney, of course, but I do teach a class in the First Amendment. And one of the core principles of modern First Amendment theory is that government should not monopolize the marketplace of ideas. So if we only have channel 10 and don't have channel 2, which is the genuine public access, it really is a government monopoly in the marketplace. And that even though it might not technically be illegal, it certainly violates the spirit of the First Amendment. And I'm hoping that the majority of city councilors will come to see this. But independently of this, Andy, even if the city, as I predict, will keep Life TV and will keep Channel 2, the public access channel, they are now shifting all production over to the Oshkosh Public Library. And it's a given that the studio in City Hall is gone. It's now used for office space. What's your view on that?
I mean, it's definitely interesting optics from the city's perspective. Like people who are paying attention, I don't think it looks good on the city side. Now, that being said, I think it could have been done well, and maybe there still is an opportunity for it to be done well, where they say like, okay, it just doesn't make sense for it to be housed or hosted within City Hall, but we want to make sure that the city continues to uphold this institution of public access that we're talking about here that we think is so valuable to civic engagement and democratic participation. As far as moving it away, where I say I think it probably is not being done so well was one is such a surprise. It's not being given the time it needs to transition properly. I have serious concerns whether they will continue to resource it enough to really help it survive. All that being said, I am excited about the library who wants to promote it. I think libraries are really well positioned to run programs like that. I think libraries are really well positioned to run programs in general. They're very good at, and ours is, I think, in Oshkosh, very good at promoting different programs more than just reading books. Like people who don't go to the library, maybe they think that's all it is. But you go there, there's all sorts of programs that are part of growing and learning as a person, but also growing and learning in your civic participation, for lack of better words. And having a channel to produce or a space to produce could be a really cool opportunity for that. My worry is it's just not being done well. It's being rushed. It's not being supported. And because of that, it will really struggle. And like you said, even if we maintain channel 2, the cable channel, which I don't see why you want at this time. I do hope they continue to maintain it. Because we get it for free. That's part of it, the deal with franchise fee. Like there's no reason to cancel. There really is not that much infrastructure because we're carrying TV. The studio, or I have often referred to it as a community media center,
Yeah.
is such an important part of society. Just like you can go to any bookstore, doesn't give you an excuse to close down libraries because people have access to book. Like I've heard some people say, well, anyone can pick up a phone and for like, which is true, but one, that's a totally different conversation. That is not near the quality, not near the ability that you can do with a full-fledged media center. In more than just the production quality and the capability, but the type of community it creates around it. So I went to school for this. I went to school for TV production at UW Oshkosh.
Right.
And that was some of the best camaraderie and my favorite memories was producing TV together. We learned things together. We built friendships. It was difficult and fun. And a lot happened on those TV sets that was, I can't replicate in other spaces. And it taught me skills that were transferable outside of, I didn't stay in TV production. I'm in marketing now. And so even outside of media, those skills are so valuable in so many ways of like how to work with a team, how to manage a schedule, a budget, and all these different things that I'm so thankful for of my program there, but especially my ability or my opportunity to work in a TV studio like that. And
Yeah.
when you lose that, man, you lose so much. I don't know if I completely got to your question, but that's my kind of thoughts.
No, you did in an excellent way. When I spoke to the city council a few weeks ago in on the issue of removing the city hall studio, I quoted the old Joni Mitchell song, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone," right? And pave paradise and put up a parking lot, put up office space. You know, here's one thing that the counselors have not seemed to appreciate. When you turn that TV studio into office space, it's not like moving the accounting department into where the planning department was. This is literally ending a public forum space,
Yes. Mhm.
right? And as an elected member of a city council, part of your obligation is to protect the public forum space. And I think that got lost. You know, I have taken so many people over the years to Oshkosh City Hall, and they've been so impressed by that studio. Like, wow, you've got a TV studio in your city hall. It still boggles my mind, Andy, that we would want to get rid of that.
Yeah. It's going to be it'd be hard to ever bring it back if we ever wanted to. And that's my concern is I think like you said we will realize after that's gone what we had. I think a lot of people will, and then at that point it's going to be way more expensive to bring it back than just maintain it. you know it's the fact that it's being rushed, the fact it's not being thought through, concerns me of just that we could even recreate that space in another area. And those who have been in that space or in other TV studios and whatnot, I mean, they would understand like there's a lot that goes into create that. There's a lot that goes into technically, but once it's there, and it's nice. But once it's gone, it's going to be very hard to ever bring it back if you want to.
Yeah, and the same might happen with the public library. I mean,
Mhm.
we're very fortunate that the director of the library, Daryl,
Mhm.
is his name, right? We're very fortunate that he happens to be an enthusiastic supporter of creating programming. What if you don't have that kind of library director?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I've talked to a few people about this too, because I've had some people say, "Oh, city shouldn't be in charge of this, whatnot," which I don't agree with at all. I think like this is our city's job to protect it. You were talking about this before. This is a public forum. We've been talking about how this encourages civic participation. There's so many things that the city provides with this. This is a service, and I've been telling people this is not a departmental operational decision
Right?
that is being made. This is not saying, "Hey, we're going to start managing our staff a little bit different." It is quite literally canceling a city service that we've had for ages. And the fact that it almost happened without any council oversight is wild to me. And now at least council is involved, but it seems like the time that people are investing in to actually uh, realizing what we lose or what it is not as much as it should have, in my opinion. If you are canceling a city service, a service that goes out to the community, that is a pretty substantial decision in my opinion, and one that we should take seriously from a governance perspective, not an operational, not an administrative question. That's a governance perspective. We wouldn't just tomorrow say we don't need parks anymore or we don't need libraries anymore. If it was like drastic enough where this library is putting our city into a $30 million deficit and we don't know what we're going to do, at that point, okay, have the hard conversation. But no one would just say, "Hey, we want this to be an office space now. We want this whole library to be office space." And so we're going to, and that is sort of what this feels like. Not to mention, I mean, it already, in my opinion, has been neglected so much over the years. Like it is a fantastic studio, but it is like in a corner. And I'm like, what are you going to get out of it? Two office spaces? That is such a horrible trade-off. Like it's such a fantastic service for the community. Um, and to get maybe a couple cubicles out of it, it is not
Yeah, and
a wise decision, in my opinion.
it's been especially frustrating because it was not rolled out with a plan as to what the new communication and engagement division is actually
Yeah,
doing. Because so far, all I'm seeing, and I hate to be hypercritical, but I'm seeing what mostly look like AI generated memos,
sure.
right? So what, so we've had this great resource for 40 odd years and we're replacing it with what exactly?
Yeah.
Because I consider myself open-minded. I would have been very willing to entertain a new proposal for that
Mhm.
space. But there never was a new proposal for that space. All there was a March 5th email, not even released to the general public, released to producers of programs that you're essentially done.
Yeah, I was frustrated when I said so. I caught that on a live TV program on Cheryl's program that she read that email, and I'm not a producer, and so if I wasn't watching that, I would not have known, and that really frustrated me that my city is canceling a major community service without informing that they tried to do it without canceling. I emailed them immediately and said, "What is going on here?" And then I got a generic email back that went to everyone. Who I think there was a lot of people emailing at that point who were frustrated. They didn't realize how many people actually appreciated and love that, whether or not they're a producer. A lot of community members love that that exists, the opportunity of it, and what it provides to the city. And that was really frustrating to me how it was rolled out, how it's been trying to be rolled out, and not really involving the community at all.
Yeah, and another part of this, Andy, you're kind of touching on it. Some of the counselors are making this argument that, well, nobody watches Channel 2 anyway. What what do you even say to something like that?
One, I don't think that's true, but I've also told
It's
people that that's actually not even the point. I mean, the point of
right.
public access is not how much engagement you have. It's not how well produced it is. It's not how entertaining it is. It's the fact that we are protecting a space and an institution that is there to protect and give access to public access to the communication channels that everyone should have access to. And that is really frustrating to me that our many of our sitting, council members, a lot of our city staff, it seems like don't understand that. We're not a business that runs off a bottom line that says, all right, this isn't producing enough money, or this isn't high enough standards, or this isn't entertaining to me. That's actually part of the point of public access, in my opinion. Sometimes the things that are on there will not compete well on the algorithms on social media. And so that cannot replace it. And that's why that institution matters, because you try to do those same things on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, or wherever. It is much more difficult if you're not placating to rage baiting. Like I follow some of our local politicians who I'm very frustrated by that. Like that is their entire platform because they know that's how they're going to grow their social platform is by just being as inflammatory and angry as possible, or as scary or as fear mongering as possible. In public access protects that infrastructure for us, so we don't have to worry about that. And so when you lose that, again, it is not about it competing with some of the major, like news networks that exist right now. That's never going to happen. That's not the purpose of it. That's actually the whole point is that you don't want to compete with that because the public, what we care about isn't going to be the most profitable thing. We're not a business.
Yeah, I mean, you're too young to remember the old Wayne's World movies from the 80s, right?
I
But
know Wayne's World. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but Wayne and Garth were doing a public access TV show, right?
Mhm.
And that was the early charm of this type of media. And we should never lose that, Andy,
Mm.
because as you said, it's community building, and it has been that. Another one of my frustrations has been the complete lack of interest that city officials have had in the history of this.
Mhm.
The sheer number of shows that have been done, the amount of producers, like my friend John Neiman with The Place to Be Oshkosh, and Mike Hurt with The Outpost, who've had their own sponsors. When you're getting sponsors to help you with your TV shows, that's the genuine kind of engagement, community building that only public access can do.
Mhm.
Podcasting does not do that as well.
Yeah. I think one thing that actually has not been talked a lot about that I've seen in the public conversation happening about this is public access's role in even archiving our culture and our history. So not only the history of the channel itself, which I agree is very important, but when you completely depend on something like YouTube or Meta or whatnot, they don't have any interest in preserving local history. They don't have any interest in our local culture. And so in 20, 30 years, if they decide, like anything that hasn't been watched in a while, we're gonna get rid, like that there is no history. There's not that connection to the culture, to the community anymore. And that is sad to see that we won't have some sort of institution. Well, I mean, I say that to say there is no community access to that anymore. What will happen is the only archival history we'll have is government coverage, what they deem as important enough. And this comes back to our conversation before. That's why that imbalance is so harmful. Again, whether it's intentional or not, the only archived history is going to be what the government channels, the marketing department deemed as important. And that is
That is
usually not what is most important to the community.
no, no, usually not. Another argument that's been raised, although it's been minimal lately, I think when they realized that didn't have legs, is this issue of budget ramifications. The the pressure on the Oshkosh budget from Channel 2 has actually been quite minimal, hasn't it?
I, to be completely honest, I don't like it is so opaque. I don't even know what I can say about that. What I've learned more and more is less and less than what they started with because they started saying it takes, I don't know, an employee, and then they were like, oh, actually, it's a halftime employee, and then we realized that was actually several different things involved in it and not live TV specific. And when it came down to it, I don't think any of them can really answer what it costs the city, which is frustrating on a few levels. It's one, frustrating that council would make a decision that is canceling an entire community service when they don't even know the financial impact it's going to have. It could be saving the city $10 a year. And why would you make a decision on, like they don't know. From what I've seen, based on the last council meeting, they talked about potentially streamlining the process so everyone would have to turn in the media in the same format. That makes sense to me. That's an operational decision that probably should have been made a while ago. They said like, hey, this is too much overhead. It doesn't mean you cancel a service. It means you fix the operational problems that exist in there. And they started with canceling because, in my opinion, that was a lazy decision that they didn't want to walk through what it actually costs the city to maintain. Um, Channel 2 for one thing, but also the studio. I don't know, like there might be there's definitely a little bit of cost with maintaining the studio, but I doubt it's that substantial because a lot of that equipment is already purchased. And
Right.
then when you come up, I mean, and those are capital expenses. This is different. Anyone who knows anything about city budget, that is different from ongoing budget. This is a completely different budget than what we're talking about here. I say all to say there's been such a lack of transparency. It's hard to even talk about it because no one actually knows what it'll cost it. But I bet it's minuscule, and that's one of the reasons I think now not a lot of conversations happen because I think they are starting to realize, oh, this has much less impact than we realize. We've already started down this path. It's easier just to continue. It sort of feels like that instead of saying, oh, we actually realize not a really has any impact at all. We could maintain this. So
Now you have reached out to counselors. You've probably contacted all the counselors on this, I would imagine, at some point.
different counselors at different times. I think I talked to a decent amount of them about different things. So I'm trying to remember who I have talked about this
Okay.
particular topic, but maybe the only one I haven't talked to is Matt because I don't understand the mayor's position on this. The mayor just seems like he wants to get rid of it, and for no reason other than I think we made this decision one. That seems to be his justification. It's like, well, one council meeting, maybe we made, which I don't agree with. I went back and looked. I'm like, you didn't really make that decision. That seems to be his reasoning, which
Well,
I
he
don't
doesn't even
agree.
seem to believe it's a city council issue. He seems to believe it's a purely administrative issue,
Yeah.
which is one of the reasons why this is up to this point. This has only been a discussion item at
Mhm.
city council meetings. Mr. Esslinger had to push to get this as a voting item. I find it highly bizarre and disturbing that we would get rid of a public forum and not have a city council weigh in on that.
I agree. I mean, one of the frustrating things I learned out of this process was when they created the new communications and engagement division, there was like almost no direction on what that is. I have
None.
asked them what is this supposed to be? Where's the definition from the legislators that say this is what we were expecting to do? And I have found nothing because there was nothing. And they basically wrote a blank check to this new person outside the community to come in. And I'm not faulting the director. Like he's working with what he has, and the council has been kind of confusing on this. And I wish they would be more clear, and I wish they would have had more clear definitions when they started and said the communication and engagement department is supposed to do both communicate and engage. And what they are currently doing is only communicating and marketing. It's not a marketing department, it's communication and engagement. And they are getting rid of the engagement part. But because there was no clear definitions of here's the things that you need to maintain, here are the services, they basically have just been doing whatever they want. and this is where, I would disagree with the mayor on this, is it um, only feels like it's an operational decision because they did not do a good job when they passed last budget to define this and do their job in governance, in my opinion. That doesn't mean it's not their job. It just means an unwise decision was made. And I think it was an accident. I think in hindsight, they should all see we should have defined this better. And that's fine. Own up to it and now fix it. That is a governance decision to cancel a community service, a public forum of communication to make sure we all have this space that's protected for us. It's what I would see as an operational decision is for them to say, this service is important. And council's going to need to decide, though. Let's say council never talked about the service itself of Channel 2 in the community space. The department could say, well, we're going to adjust some staff time. It's not going to get as much attention. I would not like to see that. I think that would be wrong. But to me, that's more of an operational discussion to say we're going to adjust our staff time. Not we're going to get rid of this space. We're going to get rid of this channel that the public depends on. We're going to get rid of these things. That is not an operational decision. That's a governance decision.
Yeah, and it just seems weird to me that a communication and engagement division would start off its tenure, if you will, by alienating people.
Hmm.
I mean, that would seem to be the exact opposite direction that you would want to go in, and it's only succeeded in turning people like me into city hall watchdogs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I'm not the only one, correct? I mean, especially you've been involved also with the flock camera issue. Uh, those people, the few that I've spoke to that are interested in that, they're now branching out and looking at a lot of things the city are doing. And I think
I
that
will
is a
say,
consequence of lack of transparency.
yep, I've had that same thought even for myself. The more I've looked at this, the more I've realized there are a lot of things that I really do not like that are happening, which you would think that you said communication and engagement department should be fixing that, not making it worse. And I'm not blaming any one individual person. It's a whole system problem. Like, there's lots of things that are going wrong in this situation. And I get it that it is complicated. Um, but there are some things that I think are clear that they need to do better. I think council needs to take ownership of what's governance and step in and say, we're going to make the decision on whether this is canceled. I think the communication and engagement department needs to say, we're going to do both communication and engagement. We're not only going to market, we're also going to make sure we are providing space for engagement with the community. But because they have lacked some of those things, I know a lot of people have been thinking, what is the problem? Myself, I used to be, I will say, I used to be much better fan of our system of governance where we had, like a city manager, a professional running it. And now I'm like, this is hard for me that council is saying we don't have this authority. Do we need to adopt a governance that is more akin to like a strong mayor or something like where we can actually say we need to make sure that we have more influence as the public? Because there have been several instances where I've talked to council members on things and they just won't listen to people in different instances. That well, this is just a small group who's angry. I've heard this a lot on Flock. I heard
Right.
this a lot on Oshkosh media and a few other issues where it's just, oh, it's just a few people. One, if you really believe that, then you need to start asking the public as a council member, is that true? Or have you just convinced yourself that, oh, this is a few people who disagree with me? And I think that's more so what's happening is they've convinced themselves that these are minor issues instead of actually listening to the public. In trying to represent what the public wants and trying to get actual good feedback, which is what an engagement division should do. And they are failing in that area right now. I want to give them grace that maybe they can come back, they can fix some of these holes, but they need to first identify that it is not going well. The irony that they are essentially creating a marketing department, but they have at the same time tremendously become untransparent, opaque, and have tremendously shut out people. It's ironic.
Yeah, I agree. And even little things like already removing the Oshkosh media sign from City
Yeah.
Hall. That I cannot believe that that was intentionally designed to antagonize people, but all that did was produce antagonism and resentment. I mean, they didn't even officially vote yet, right, to disband Channel 2, and already the sign comes down. That just seems like very, very poor communication in my judgment.
I mean, and this is why I said before, it's bad optics if nothing else. Even if things go right, I'm like, this does not look good in the city's part. Like it's, I mean, you're gonna need a full-time PR person to recover from some of these things because it is really bad optics on why the city, like you said, whether or not they even move forward with it to do it before it was voted on is
Yeah.
okay. So does our city staff just have the ability to do anything and just assume that the counselors are going to go with them? That's kind of what it feels like, and that is what it's felt like on a lot of issues I've worked with, where they just rubber stamp things that, well, we just trust whatever they say, even when it is our job to govern this area. And that is really frustrating as a resident here, that knowing that that is how it operates a lot of time. I'm glad that they trust professionals, but there are certain times you need to take a step back and say, I am here to make sure that
Right.
our professionals are doing it the way that our community wants. This is not their community, it's our community. That is what is really frustrating to me on a lot of these issues. And Oshkosh Community being one of the big ones, that people would come in and even people from outside our community who work in here saying like, well, this is just how we run our operations, our business. This is our community. These are our city services that we should have the most say in. In fact, if you work for this city and you don't live here, you probably shouldn't really have any say. To just You should listen to what the public has to say. Now if there's genuine disagreement, I would love to hear that. If there's genuine, like, other people in the community are saying, yeah, we want to get rid of this or whatnot because we think that, $10 a year is more warranted to go to somewhere else or whatever it may be. Okay, I would love to hear that. Let's talk about it. Like you said, I like to think I'm a reasonable person. I would have had that discussion if they
Yeah.
showed me, oh, this is costing us $3 million, but right now the housing authority is underfunded and we want to shift that. I'd be okay, let's talk about that. What needs to take a priority? But that is not the case. It is just, I don't know, office rooms. I don't know what it is.
Andy, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sure that we'll be talking much more about this and other issues. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
All right.